On June 22nd, 2025, the United States launched one of the most ambitious military operations of the century. Long-range B-2 bombers and cruise missiles fired from American submarines struck Iran's three most critical nuclear facilities, including Fordow, buried within a mountain dozens of meters deep. President Trump appeared publicly and said, and I'm quoting directly, that the Iranian facilities had been obliterated. That was the exact word, obliterated. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth confirmed complete success. The Iranian nuclear program had been put on hold for years. Now I want you to look at what was happening at the same time. On that same day, hours before the bombs fell, commercial satellite images, later analyzed by the newspaper Le Monde and the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, showed a convoy of trucks loaded with containers leaving the Isfahan facility. The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed in a confidential report, leaked to the Associated Press the following day. On June 13, 2025, Iran possessed 440.9 kilograms of uranium, enriched to 60%. This material has never been located within the ruins of Fordow or Isfahan. Let that number settle. 440 kilograms. Enough material, if enriched one more technical step, for approximately 10 nuclear weapons. Disappeared. American envoy Steve Witkoff publicly stated weeks later, during negotiations in Islamabad, that Iranian negotiators boasted of having enough uranium for 11 nuclear bombs, ours, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe said the damage would be devastating and would take years to rebuild. These two things cannot be true at the same time. Either the program was obliterated, or there is enough enriched uranium for more than a dozen nuclear weapons in an unknown location. And today I want to spend the next 20 minutes showing you exactly which of the two is wrong, and what that means for the world you live in now. If you followed the 2026 war, the February 28th attacks, the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, the Pakistani brokered ceasefire in April, the failed negotiations in Islamabad, and came to the conclusion that the United States is winning the battle for nuclear control of Iran. I completely understand why you would think that. This is the dominant narrative. This is what is being repeated. The targets have been hit. The Iranian leadership has been beheaded. The ceasefire is in effect. Negotiations continue, and all the major media outlets are asking the same question. Have they finally managed to destroy the Iranian nuclear program? That's the wrong question. Not because it's irrelevant, but because it presupposes that Iran's objective was to have a nuclear facility that could be photographed, inspected, and destroyed. And if that premise is fundamentally wrong, then every bomb dropped, every facility destroyed, every satellite photograph of craters not only failed to solve the problem, it made it far more dangerous. The right question is not, did the U.S. destroy the Iranian nuclear program? The real question is, what happens when you force a state to disperse 440 kilograms of near-military-grade uranium to secret locations and then lose track of it? And that's exactly what we're going to answer today. The first thing I need to do is present a model. I call it the invisible inventory trap. You need to understand this model before anything else, because without it, every new development in the coming weeks will seem isolated, confusing, and contradictory. The invisible inventory trap describes The strategic principle by which a successful military attack against known nuclear infrastructure, when carried out without the ability to secure control of existing physical material, does not eliminate the nuclear hazard, it renders it undetectable. There are 4 conditions. When all are present, the trap closes. Condition 1. The target state possesses already enriched physical material, not just the capacity to enrich it. This is crucial. Destroying centrifuges is one thing. Destroying already enriched uranium is something completely different, because enriched uranium doesn't evaporate in an explosion. It needs to be physically located and removed or destroyed. Condition 2. The target state receives advance intelligence, formal or informal, about the timing of the attack, and here the facts are devastating. Iran turned off the IAEA surveillance cameras in June 2022, 3 years before the attacks. Not by accident. The Isfahan convoy was photographed before the bombs fell. This is not speculation. It's on record. Condition 3. The attacker's success metric is physical and visible. Destroyed facilities, craters, satellite images, while the failure metric is invisible, material that was knocked off before being hit. Trump can show Fordo destroyed. He can't show where the 440 kilograms are. Condition 4. After the attack, the international verification mechanism is eliminated. And here we come to the most important fact of all, which is being alarmingly underestimated. On February 28, 2026, the same day the U.S. and Israel launched the second round of attacks, Iran formally ended all cooperation with the IAEA. All cameras were turned off, all seals were removed, all inspectors were expelled. As confirmed by the nuclear tracker itself, updated as of June 9, 2026, the IAEA is unable to verify the extent of the damage caused by the attacks, the status of stockpiles of enriched material, or whether clandestine enrichment activities are continuing. Unable to verify. Let it settle. The historical precedent is accurate to the point of being disturbing. In July 1981, the Israeli Air Force destroyed the Osirak nuclear reactor in Iraq in an operation considered to this day a model of preventive military surgery. Saddam Hussein, internationally embarrassed, did exactly what any rational strategic analyst would do. He dispersed, decentralized, and made clandestine what remained. In 1991, when coalition forces entered Iraq and the IAEA was finally able to inspect freely, it discovered that Saddam had come closer to a nuclear bomb than any Western estimate had predicted. Not despite the 1981 attack, partly because of it. The attack forced dispersal. Dispersal created invisibility. Invisibility created a threat that the inspectors couldn't see. Now look at what is happening in Iran in 2026 through that same lens. Let's build the case, piece by piece. On June 24, 2025, 2 days after Operation Midnight Hammer, PBS News published a report citing an assessment by the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency. At least some of Iran's highly enriched uranium had been moved from multiple locations before the American attacks, and the Iranian centrifuges were, for the most part, intact. The White House called it a political leak. Ratcliffe of the CIA came forward the next day with a different assessment. 2 American intelligence reports, 2 days, opposing conclusions. When 2 intelligence agencies from the same government reach opposing conclusions about the same event 2 days after it happened, that's not a technical disagreement. That's the clearest possible sign that nobody actually knows where the material is. Now, why does this matter strategically? Because on March 8, 2026, the New York Times reported that American intelligence agencies determined there is a very narrow access point at the bombed Isfahan facility, through which uranium buried by the explosions could potentially be recovered, and that the U.S. and Israel debated sending special forces into Iranian territory to secure the uranium stockpile. This was reported by Axios, citing 4 sources with knowledge of the discussions. Think about what this means. The United States, the world's greatest military power, which has just conducted 2 years of offensive campaigns against Iran, is debating sending special forces into enemy territory to find nuclear material that should have been destroyed. This is not a cleanup operation. This is a search mission. On April 27, 2026, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, not a propaganda outlet, but one of the most respected scientific publications on nuclear risks, founded by physicists from the Manhattan Project, published an analysis with satellite imagery showing that Iran may have transferred up to 540 kilograms of highly enriched uranium to Isfahan before the June attacks, potentially its entire inventory. 540 kilograms, enrichment of 60%. Location unknown. On April 11th and 12th, 2026, Vice President J.D. Vance led a 300-person American delegation to the Islamabad talks, the highest-level direct diplomatic meeting between the U.S. and Iran since 1979. 21 hours of negotiations. And the result? Trump publicly stated, most points were agreed upon, but the one point that mattered, nuclear, was not. The only point that mattered. And immediately after the talks failed, the U.S. announced a naval blockade of Iran. The Strait of Hormuz, through which a fifth of the world's oil passes, remains a central point of contention. Now, I want to do something that I believe is an obligation for any good analyst. I want to present the opposing argument in the strongest possible way. The argument goes like this. The attacks were successful enough to delay the Iranian program for years. The infrastructure was destroyed. The leadership was decapitated. Iran is negotiating because it is weakened. And even if some enriched uranium survived, without centrifuges and without functioning facilities, that material is useless. That's the strongest argument there is, and I take it seriously. But there's one question that this argument simply cannot answer. If the destruction of the facilities truly rendered the enriched material useless, why did American envoy Steve Witkoff leave the negotiations in Islamabad saying that the Iranians boasted of having enough uranium for 11 bombs? And why were the U.S. and Israel debating special forces operations to secure that same material? You don't send special forces after useless material. Never. Now, I want to add a dimension to this that I haven't seen any relevant media outlet addressing with the depth it deserves. All public debate is focused on Iran, on the Strait of Hormuz, on the negotiations in Islamabad, on Khamenei's successor, on the fragile ceasefire. But there is a second-order consequence that is being almost completely ignored, and which may be more significant than anything that happens in Iran. Here is the logical chain of reasoning. Iran ended all cooperation with the IAEA on February 28th, 2026. This means that the nuclear verification architecture that the world has built since 1968, the NPT, the IAEA safeguards, the system of cameras and inspectors, has been effectively suspended for one of the most nuclear advanced states on the planet. That, in itself, would be worrying. But it's not what keeps strategists awake at 3 in the morning. What keeps them awake is the following question. Which other states are watching this and recalibrating their own nuclear decisions? Think about the incentives that have been created over the last 12 months. Libya surrendered its nuclear program in 2003. Muammar Gaddafi was deposed and killed in 2011. Saddam Hussein had no verifiable weapons of mass destruction. He was overthrown and executed. Iran signed the JCPOA in 2015, accepting limits to its program. It was attacked in 2025 and again in 2026. And what about North Korea, which never abandoned its nuclear program and today possesses between 40 and 50 confirmed warheads? Nobody attacks North Korea. This is not an observation I am making. It is an observation that at least 15 states in the world, states that are currently on the verge of a nuclear decision, are making. States like Saudi Arabia, which has publicly pledged to develop nuclear capability if Iran were to have it. States in Southeast Asia. States in Eastern Europe. The message the world is taking away from the last 2 years is not nuclear programs will be destroyed. The message is, if you have a bomb, you are safe. If you don't, you are not safe. And the second level of this consequence is even more silent and even more dangerous. With Iran cut off from the IAEA with 440 or more kilograms of enriched uranium in an unknown location, with a new government in Washington right now. This isn't being discussed with the depth it deserves in any mainstream media outlet. And I think that silence says something important about what people who know more than we do are, or aren't, willing to say publicly. Based on everything we've examined today, here are 3 specific things I want you to watch for over the next 48 to 72 hours. These are your testable hypotheses. This is how you test any geopolitical theory. First, observe whether or not the ongoing negotiations between the U.S. and Iran include an independent physical verification mechanism. Not declarations, not verbal commitments, but inspectors with real and unrestricted access to specific facilities. If the U.S. accepts a deal without this mechanism, it means that Washington either doesn't know where the material is or has decided that the nuclear issue is less urgent than the Strait of Hormuz. Either answer changes everything you think you know about the real objectives of this war. Second, consider Saudi Arabia. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman publicly stated in 2018 that if Iran developed a nuclear weapon, Saudi Arabia would do the same. Iran today possesses, according to the American envoy himself, material for 11 bombs in an unknown location and no verification mechanism in place. If in the coming days you see any indication, a statement, a diplomatic trip, a meeting with Pakistan or China, suggesting that Riyadh is accelerating any kind of conversation about nuclear capability, that is the second pendulum swinging. If you see nothing, that silence is also an answer. Third, observe what Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, son of the assassinated Ayatollah, still without a consolidated mandate, says about the nuclear program in his first substantive foreign policy speech. If he adopts the language of inalienable rights to enrichment, this signals that the program has survived politically and strategically. If he adopts the language of negotiation and reconstruction, this signals that Iran is willing to trade nuclear transparency for the lifting of sanctions and reconstruction. The difference between these two paths is not rhetorical. It is structural, and it will define the next 10 years in the Middle East. For your homework, and I mean it, I want you to do this, there are two documents that I want you to put side by side. The first is the confidential IAEA report from July 2025, leaked to the Associated Press, which confirms the 440.9 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% on June 13, 2025, one day before the first Israeli attacks. It is available in multiple media outlets that quote it directly, including Yahoo News and the Times of Israel. Read the exact number. Read what the IAEA said it was able or unable to verify at that time. The second is the transcript of Vice President J.D. Vance's public statement following the failure of the Islamabad talks on April 12, 2026, available on the official White House website. Read exactly what Vance said about the one point that wasn't agreed upon. Then read the statement from Iranian negotiator Mohammad Bagher Kalibaf from the same day, available in PBS News coverage. Place these two documents side by side. Look at what was in Iranian stockpiles in June 2025. Look at what American negotiators still haven't secured in April 2026. And ask yourself if what happened between those two moments can honestly be called success.